This is a story about the people who never post, the quiet ones who watch everything from the edges of the screen, and the psychology behind why their silence isn't emptiness, but control, protection, and a different way of staying human in a world obsessed with being seen. There's a particular kind of quiet you find online. Not the silence of an empty room, but the quiet of someone who's here, scrolling, observing, yet leaving no trace behind. No posts, no updates, no look at me. You've seen people like this. Maybe you are one of them. Everyone else performs their lives for the feed. Angles, captions, carefully framed versions of themselves. But some accounts remain still, untouched, like they chose a different kind of existence. Some profiles never move. A picture, maybe one old post, then nothing, just a silent presence in a noisy world. People assume they're shy, distant, or uninterested, but their silence is rarely accidental. It's deliberate, shaped by experiences, instincts, and a psychology that pulls them away from constant visibility. In a world that displays everything, choosing not to post becomes a form of power. Silence becomes control. A boundary drawn without explanation. They decide what remains untouched. They decide what the world never gets to twist into a story. Social platforms teach people to carve themselves into smaller, more presentable versions. Every post becomes a quiet audition. Here I am. Do you approve? The ones who stay silent step off that stage. They're not trying to be mysterious. They're trying to stay whole. Psychologists see patterns in people who rarely post. Higher introspection, stronger restraint, more emotional independence. They don't need applause to feel real. They don't need digital noise to believe their thoughts matter. They observe instead. They notice how people shape-shift for attention. They sense the strain behind polished confidence. They catch the tone between someone's words, what's said and what's avoided. Where others rush to speak, the quiet ones study the room. This is internal locus of control, identity shaped from within, not from reactions. But silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's exhaustion. There's a psychological weight called self-presentational pressure. The feeling of being evaluated even when no one says a word. Each upload becomes a risk. What if they misunderstand? What if no one reacts? What if this moment follows me longer than it should? For many, that pressure becomes too heavy, so they retreat into quiet, not to hide, but to breathe. There's an idea in psychology called psychological ownership. The sense that certain memories should belong only to you. But the moment you post something, it changes. A private moment becomes public material. It can be judged, ignored, twisted, or forgotten in seconds. For some people, that loss feels personal. Too personal. They start noticing how easily a moment is reduced to a caption, how quickly a sincere feeling becomes content, how identity bends under the push to be seen. This is where identity erosion begins. The quiet sense that the more you share, the less of your life feels like it truly belongs to you. So they protect their experiences. They guard what feels too human to display. Social platforms run on dopamine. You post. Someone reacts. Your brain lights up. Slowly, life rearranges itself around what earns attention. Moments stop being lived and start being curated. The people who step out of this loop aren't careless, they're disciplined. They've seen what the loop does to the mind, and they quietly choose something else. As they stay away, things shift. Their focus deepens, their self-worth steadies. Comparison loses its grip. This is reward loop resistance, the moment where a person stops asking, "How does this look?" and starts asking, "How does this feel?" When that shift happens, silence becomes freedom, not avoidance. Not everyone who goes silent began that way. Some once posted everything, until something shifted, sometimes slowly, sometimes sharply. A betrayal, a harsh comment, a private moment exposed too widely, a realization that they were performing more than living. This leads to identity fatigue, the emotional exhaustion of shaping yourself for an audience that never stops watching. So they step away, quietly, without announcements, just a slow disappearance from the feed, and in that vanishing, something returns. Their own voice, their own pace, their own life. People misread silent ones as cold or detached, but in person, something different shows up entirely. They often have deeper stories, sharper memory, more emotional presence, more awareness of the small changes in your eyes or your tone. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's depth. Some of the most defining moments in life never appear online. A private realization, a quiet forgiveness, a grief that reshapes everything, a victory with no witnesses, a kindness that exists without an audience. These are the moments that build a person. Psychologists call the alignment between inner and outer self congruence. Constant posting bends that alignment. Silence protects it. So when you see someone who never posts, don't assume they're hiding. Maybe they're choosing depth over display. Maybe they've learned that meaning doesn't need witnesses. Their silence asks a harder question. Who would you be if you stopped performing and simply lived? What would your life look like if no one could watch? For them, that question isn't hypothetical. It's real, unannounced, unedited, human before everything else. In a world desperate to be seen, their quiet is a reminder. Not everything meaningful needs an audience. Some parts of you are meant to stay untouched by the crowd.